Are you burned out with your job? Nearly 67% of people report that they are. It's no surprise that the pursuit of financial freedom is on the rise. Movements like FIRE are inspiring people to make moves to take back control of their lives. Anyone can take that journey. All it takes is some financial know-how, a bit of math, and some grit. But what is it really like? Today on Escape the Clock, 3 people at 3 different stages of their FI journey. I think you'll be surprised by the lessons they've been learning along the way. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, you're listening to Escape the Clock, the podcast where I, the author, break down how you can achieve financial freedom and have the option not to work. If you've been following with me this far on the journey, you've heard a lot from me on the things I did on my journey, projects and stuff that could help you, and also interviews with experts from everything college savings to behavioral finance to just literally how to manage debt. And it's been awesome having experts come in and talk about things. But sometimes we just need to be able to hear from normal people and understand that the things that we need to do will actually work. And I can talk about my own case study as much as you want, but that's just a sample size of one. What would really help is to hear other people at different phases of their journey. And that's exactly what we're doing today. I brought in 3 different people from 3 different phases of financial independence journeys of their own. Someone who is early on the path, someone who's about to make the transition, and someone who has made that transition and is much later in a retirement. Of course, I can talk about my own, and I'll mention some things at the end as I kind of conclude some of the big insights. But overall, what I'm trying to touch on is things that are inspiring us, the things that help us break free of the status quo, overcome those challenges that we all face day to day, and how different life can be at different phases. There's a numbers game, and then there are moves that we need to make to ensure that cash will be there when we need it. It's nothing all that difficult to figure out, but it can still be worrisome when we don't know, will it work for me? Especially when there's not a paycheck there any longer. So let's get right into it and bring in the first guest. Hi, Brad. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome. For the audience, could you please just take a moment to introduce yourself, include your name, your age, where you live, and what you've mostly been doing for a living?
My name is Brad. I live in Ohio, Southern Ohio. I am currently 38 years old, if I remember correctly. After about 25 years old, I think it kind of just, you lose track of it, and it's all just a number. So pushing 40 there. I am a civil engineer for my day job. Been doing that since I was in my early 20s. I design sewers for a living, so nothing terribly exciting. It's not rocket engineering, but it pays the bills, and I take pride in what I do. So,
tell me a little bit about what inspired you to get into that career, and also what inspired you to get into working towards financial independence.
Definitely come from a family of engineers, so I don't know if I put a whole lot of thought into it or if it was just what my dad did and my grandparents did, my grandfathers. So that's how I ended up in engineering. I guess I could have gone down a slightly different path. There are various different forms of engineering, but I like the civil concept. You get to go outside on a rare occasion, see those things that you build in person. Occasionally, those construction sites can be fun. As far as the FIRE path, that started in my early 20s after I was married. My wife is a engineer as well, and we both thought we were going to be making big money, have tons of cash in the bank, right? And after a couple of years, we were like, man, we feel like we're just on a hamster wheel, just going nowhere fast, right? And we started thinking about it, and we started, looking at our taxes, and we're like, wow, we're paying like $20,000-$30,000 in debt every year. Yeah, it just, which kind of just eats away at your budget, right? And it was just common stuff, right? We were living the American dream, right? We bought a house when we first got married. We bought 2 brand new cars, that kind of stuff. A whole mountain of student loan debt that was associated with our degrees, right? And it just ends up adding up quickly and can kind of drag you down. And we're like, we've got to do something. We got to get out of this. And we started with where a lot of people start with just paying off debt, right? Like the Dave Ramsey program. It worked pretty well at first, but and thankfully we were able to pay off a lot of that debt pretty quickly, but found ourselves saying, hey, what's next? What's the bigger picture here?
Gotcha. So you didn't necessarily choose your career path with financial independence in mind, but if I understand properly, as you were working through it, you had some kind of eye-opening moments, if you will, that made you realize you had to do something different, right? Than just kind of go through that grind.
Correct. And it is a engineering in general. I mean, all careers are stressful, but certainly engineering can be kind of a higher stress, higher demanding career, which is often why it's a little more lucrative, right? They tend to compensate you well for that time. But yeah, just felt like, those first 3 or 4 years we got into it and it was just something just wasn't right. Not necessarily with the career, but just, our finances and where we were going in life. And something needed to change.
So what was the biggest catalyst for you? Were there was some, like you mentioned the debt before, was there any other potential financial things that were just kind of surprising to you that you realized, oh, I need to be able to use, was it the debt reduction, I guess I should ask, that inspired you to do more to go towards fully independence? Or was it more of like the long scape retiring at 60, 70? Like what was that big inspiration for you?
I would say it started with the debt. It was just the anxiety of having so much debt, easily three, $400,000. I think, but if you added up, the mortgage and everything, student loans, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's kind of nerve-wracking when you're 23, 24 years old to have that kind of debt. So that's certainly where it started, was more of a debt-free journey, right? And like I said, that went pretty quickly. I think we got our home paid off before we were 30, and we're completely debt free. And in our late 20s, as we were approaching that point where the debt was going to be paid off, we kind of were saying, hey, that, to be honest, it went a little quicker and easier than we thought. What's next? What can we do with this, with these financial decisions that we're making? Can we do something bigger with it, right?
That's awesome. Congrats on paying off the house. That's a big milestone. I know it's an important one in the program as well. So it sounds like you had some wins, and that really put some wind in your sail, and you kept going. How far are you along on your path right now to FI?
So we're about halfway there, both in term of years as well as, our financial goal. So we're aiming for about $4 million as our financial independence number, and we're coming up on about the 2 million mark. And like I said, we're about halfway there. I'm hoping to retire by, around 50 plus or minus. So that is our goal.
Awesome. And for anyone wondering, like, do you feel like your background or anything with your upbringing or anything made you more well adapted to doing this path? Or do you kind of think it doesn't really matter? Anyone can kind of do what you're trying to do?
I mean, obviously, as an engineer, numbers and math comes easy, but as I've told other people before, I mean, really the math behind financial independence and personal finance is not difficult. If you've had like seventh grade algebra, you can more than easily do any of the numbers and calculations you need to figure out, compound interest and how to make a budget and pay down debt, right? That's really not the hard part. It's more the motivation. And that's within anybody's reach, right? It doesn't have to be, you're a math wizard or you make hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? You're some doctor, lawyer making crazy money. I mean, it really is achievable, in my opinion, with just about any middle class income and anyone of any average education. You could definitely be a school teacher or a firefighter or a police officer and end up with the same results.
Yeah, it seems like there's a calculator out there for everything now. So gotta have a tool to get the job done.
Yeah, the internet, right?
Yeah.
Google it.
So thinking back on your journey a little bit, what were some of the biggest kind of hardships that surprised you working towards this? And also what were the big wins? Like were there things that you're looking back and you're like, okay, that was actually really challenging, or maybe things you're even working towards right now that you're not fully past yet?
I mean, some of the challenging things were, especially early on, we definitely went pretty intense into it. As far as, we spent probably the first year, once we decided, okay, this is what we're doing, we went an entire year without going out to a restaurant, just not eating out, not no takeout, no nothing, just cooking at home, which was a big change. And we've certainly continued that trend. We eat out a little bit, but not like multiple times a week like we had before we started our journey, right? And we went as far as doing the rice and beans and all that kind of stuff that Dave Ramsey talks about. I don't know if he's joking when he says that or if he's serious, but we took it serious and we actually did rice and beans like almost every meal for an entire year and made some pretty big sacrifices early on, which, looking back on it was extremely difficult. But at the same time, being years past that, I'm very thankful that we made those sacrifices. So,
Like lean fire in both approach and figure.
yeah. And we have backed off a lot as we've gotten older, especially when we had kids. You can't keep that same level of intensity going for many, many years. You could do it for a year or two, but at the same time, you do have to recognize that this journey, this fire journey that we're on, a lot of people, they look at the end goal, but you got to kind of enjoy the journey along the way. That journey is called life and you have to live it and it goes by quick. And looking back, right, I started this when I was 26, 28-ish in that region. I'm pushing 40. Yeah, that's a lot of life to live if you were just sitting there waiting for some magical number at the end, light at the end of the tunnel. You got to enjoy the trip, right?
So glad you brought that up. And help me understand your current mindset. Do you find because you're on this journey when instabilities are happening with work or in life in general, does that give you any extra resilience knowing that independence is in your future? Or do you find, oh, no, that's just adding stress because you're not quite to your goal yet?
I think it reduces stress, really. It gives you options, right? It makes you not afraid to take risks potentially with your career to do something that you really enjoy. I haven't done it yet, but I mean, I've heard of other people taking some time off of work, a couple months in between jobs, changing careers to something that's less stressful. Me personally, or, within my family, it has allowed my wife to work reduced hours, which is awesome. She can work, part time. And again, she's still an engineer, right? But she can work, just a few hours every day. And then still have time left over to, pick the kids up after school, do something fun with them, take them to the park, right? So she can focus a little more on family that way. And, without going down this fire path, I don't know if that's something we would have been able to achieve. Having no mortgage is kind of awesome, right? Paying off, auto loans very quickly and getting rid of that debt. Then frees up money so that you're like, oh, we don't really need two full incomes right now. We can go down to an income and a half and still have money left over to save for retirement.
So imagine you're at the finish line. You got there where you're working towards. You said you're about maybe a little over halfway. What are you going to do with your time? What are you working towards?
Put our feet in the sand and enjoy the the Florida sunshine. Partly joking, but partly serious. So our next big goal is to buy a condo or a small house in Florida. So, that's something that has always been a very long-term goal and was like, oh yeah, we'll get to it one of these days, but has become more serious recently. We got the cars paid off, the house paid off, the student loans. And we started just pumping money into the 401k as much as we could, right? And we're finally at a position now, especially with, everything paid off, that we're like, oh, we can actually start saving cash, potentially for a down payment on a, second residence, right? As well as to be able to cover the cost of that second residence. So there's certainly some perks that can come along with financial independence. They don't happen right away, and they're goals you have to work towards, but they're good motivation and they're fun when you get there, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah, you have to have that thing you're working towards. And yeah, that's cool to hear that about what you're trying to do there. And it sounds like in your plan, you are looking at it as a second residence. So is this a place you're thinking like you would live part of the year or would you be renting out? What is your primary residence right now? What kind of strategies do you have in mind?
So early on, our goal is to rent it out a good portion of the year, cover expenses, HOA fees, right, property taxes, especially while we're still working full time and have kids that are in grade school and everything like that. But as we approach that retirement age, we'll probably, hopefully by then it'll be paid off. We'll take it off the market and it will become more of a second home that we can spend many months out of the year. And especially when our kids are 18 plus, they're in college, we're empty nesters. There's no point in sticking around in the cold. We might as well go somewhere warm. Yeah. For anyone familiar with Ohio, it does tend to get kind of cold. So.
Was born and raised there. No, very well. Yeah, we actually did something similar. I'm in my early retirement. We just closed on a condo ourselves as part of our plan. It's not in Florida, so we don't get to work. But it definitely is great to see those kinds of things happening because they are attainable given time. So one last question for you, Brad. So you've been on this journey longer than maybe others have, or some haven't even started yet. They're considering it. What advice would you give someone who's thinking about trying to go on fire or any kind of financial independence journey? Things maybe what would you have liked to hold yourself if you could go back and give yourself some tips?
My one tip would be to take action. I think really what started everything was a book called Success Principles by Jack Canfield. I have no stake in it. I don't even, never met the guy. That was like the first book I had read that really motivated me and started my journey. And I think the key takeaway was to do something. So many people, including myself, we sit around and we dream and we think about these things and we hope they come true someday, right? But nothing's going to happen if you don't take action. So, it's great to read about fire and have all these, motivation and goals and everything, but you got to do something. You got to open that 401k. You got to start saving. You got to cut expenses. You just need to start doing things, and you don't become rich overnight. It doesn't happen by accident. It realistically takes many decades, and it takes a lot of sacrifice and hard work. And it's lots of little steps along the way. And all those steps require you to take action, and just one step at a time, keep making goals, keep making progress.
Awesome. Time is the secret, but you got to start today. Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Brad, for coming on the podcast and sharing your journey. This has been really great hearing, and best of luck getting to the rest of your goals, making it to your condo, Florida.
Thanks for having me.
First, start with introducing yourself, including your name, your age, where you currently live, and what you currently do for a living.
All right. Well, my name is Francis. I am late 40s and definitely over the hill. I live in the greater Seattle metro area. If I say the city I live in, people usually don't have no idea. But if I say Seattle, they usually have a general idea, right? It's a Pacific Northwest where it rains 9 times a year, according to Sleepless in Seattle. So that probably shows my age since I remember that movie. What do I do for a living? So I actually did pretty much the same job that Dan did before he took this fire journey. And so I am what they called a program manager at one of the high-tech companies. I guess you could think of my job as herding cats.
I'm excited to have you on, Francis. We are very similar, right? Similar age, live in a similar area, did a similar job.
Similar work history too.
Similar work history as well. Yeah. So it'll be neat to hear about your journey, where you are and how you see some of this stuff. I can't wait to compare notes with you here. Mm-hmm. I want to start with the beginning, though. Tell me, like, when you were younger, how did you think about your future, like what you wanted to do when it came to work, and how was your relationship with money?
When I was younger, I was very much of a work before life kind of guy, i.e., that old dichotomy, either you live to work or you work to live. I think I was more in the live to work camp. This was, right after the 90s and the early 2000s. Tech was still young, relatively, at that stage. And as a young person making my way around through the world, it's about demonstrating what I can offer to the world, right? And I do that by basically working my butt off. In terms of my relationship with money, I've always seen money as a vehicle to freedom, a vehicle so that I can, I guess even before I knew fire was a thing, I'm convinced that by saving and most importantly, investing money, I am paying my future self so that one day I don't have to work. I don't have to worry about the thing.
Did you come across that as an epiphany, or was that part of your values in the beginning?
It's interesting that you talk about it, where they came from. So I would like to say they came from my parents, but even my parents, when I first started working, and I see how much I saved, they're more the boomer generation, even though they grew up in China, and their boomer years, their younger years was nothing like the American boomers, right? Their younger years were plagued by Mao's Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, and crazy stuff like that. Well, I was going to say, even my parents, when they saw how much I saved, they were kind of astounded. It's like, where did this come from? Like, yes, we did save some money, but we're not so stringent like him. And I'll give you an example, right? I'm pretty sure as soon as my second paycheck, I've started maximizing the 401k, start doing employee stock purchases and so on. So basically, all my disposable income, or even I wouldn't even call it disposable income, I basically paid my future self first before I paid my present self. My second paycheck started going into my retirement fund even before I even knew the term FIRE existed. It's just somehow I just got that mentality, and I've never stopped for the quarter century or so that I've been working. I would say one thing that my parents and my upbringing did distill in me is I grew up at a time. I mean, if you think of China, and when people talk about China these days, they think of Beijing, Shanghai, and people are posh and rich and all that, right? But I grew up at a time when even to buy eggs and meat from the market, you gotta have rationing tickets. Our family lived in a 200 square feet room from the time when I was basically since the time I was born, all the way up until when I was maybe 9 or 10 years old. Then we finally moved into a apartment flat that's 600 square feet. It was 2 bedrooms.
That's fascinating. How much of, because we talked about this on the show before about our money scripts, how our values are formed based on our upbringing. And it's implicit a lot of time. It's not like we're even taught this way. It's what we infer based on what's happening. Do you feel like you've had a scarcity mindset at points of your life where you're worried about
I would
not having
say, yeah, I'd say you're right. Because of my upbringing, and it's starkly different compared to someone that's just born, say, 5 or 6 years later than me, born in 1980s. I'd say I grew up with scarcity mindset. Money was tight, even though at the time I didn't really use money or anything. I didn't really have a use for money. My parents were, I wouldn't say they're living paycheck to paycheck, but there's very little to save, and things are relatively expensive. Most of the money that they make from jobs and so on is spent on food. So it's a very different world. If I compare my childhood and my children's childhood, it's a very different world that we grew up in.
And so is it fair to say then that you see a lack of money as something that can trap you then? Because you mentioned freedom, and I want to dig a little bit more into that and understand, how do you envision your future when you get to a point where you can quit your job?
I am much closer to the FIRE journey end or exit point, whatever you want to call it. I'm much closer to that now than I was before. And in fact, one of the things that your book and talking to you made me realize is I'm practically there. But I'm of a personality that I like to plan and prepare for things. So, for example, one of the things that reading your book got me into high gear is actually take a detailed account of my spending. So even though the back of envelope calculation wise, I think I'm ready, I still want to see what our family's expense is going to be like so that I can put the numbers together. I'm just very by the book kind of guy.
Yeah, a lot of what I'm trying to teach here is the planning tools so that we can feel better because we have a higher degree of certainty, even though there is no absolute certainties. It's great to hear that you have a good sense of what your FI number is and that you're close, if not already there. How does your family feel about what you're trying to do? Generally supportive, excited about this?
My immediate family is very supportive. I think my wife is very supportive of this. She has some, I wouldn't call it worries, but like uncertainties as to, what are we going to do with the health insurance, where we're going to live, and that type of things. One of my key goals for retiring early is so that I can homeschool our two kids. They have been in the public school system. My oldest one is about to get into high school, and I've been through high school, and I think she's of a similar personality I was when I was her age, and I don't think she's going to enjoy high school all that much. And also, I've been learning more about homeschooling. And one of the things that both my wife and I deeply believe in is that we believe in education not equals to schooling, i.e. indoctrination knowledge, but rather teaching and coaching our children how to become agentic adults. I don't know what the future holds. I mean, for all I know, like the jobs that you and I worked for the last 20 something years, probably not going to exist in 5 or 10 years.
At least not in the same way. I think that's
right. Exactly. Right. With AI and all these technologies. So I have no idea what the future looks like. A lot of Asian parents, in this sense, they will push their kids into what's the perceived road to success. And I'm of a different mindset in that I want to prepare them for not what exists today, but what may exist in the future. And I see FIRE as a way of so that I can devote more time to educate them in that fashion.
I really admire that. I think, I know we can be productive as parents and we want the best for our kids. And I have a daughter in high school right now, in public school, and it is challenging for sure. That was one of the reasons that pushed me off the fence, because I was past my number, but not making the move. And I realized the window of time we have with our children, if we do our role well and they do leave the nest, it does shrink, and I was losing that. So I wanted to make sure I had that time, kind of similar to you. So it will teaching financial literacy. Is that part of the plan for the kids?
Absolutely.
Okay. I've talked about that a lot on the show too. I think that has to be something we all take on as individuals more. It's not just like teaching ourselves. We got to teach the next generation, because generational wealth is so difficult to maintain and build. So tell me more about your journey. I know you've done well if you're at the point where you can make the transition. What were the strategies that worked best for you?
So this is going to sound cliche. When I started working, it was a different world and asset prices are still relatively cheap and so on and so forth. Let me give you a counterexample, right? I have contemporaries whom, when I started working and started stocking money away, they told me, come on, dude, relax. You got to live a little. Or another message I've heard is, well, I have no idea where I'm going to retire, and so I'm not going to stock away money for retirement. I guess among my group of friends and colleagues and so on, I'm kind of odd one out in that I decided to pay my future self before I pay my present self. And this worked for me. It's just this slow but constant accumulation, stocking money away, putting them in ETF, putting away index mutual funds, and managing myself. And if I know what I know now, of course, there's bound to be way better strategies. Like, for example, I invest in Netflix stock. I put like $2,000 into it in 2002. And when it 10x in 2012, I thought, holy shit, I hit the jackpot. I'm going to sell it. And then from there on, it went up like another 100x. So there are plenty of mistakes I've made. But the message I'm trying to say is, even with all these mistakes, I have essentially achieved my goals. So this is more of a time game than a timing game. Yes, I do some market timing, but I think of it as almost a lottery ticket or a casino of some sorts, right? There's more experimentation. The vast bulk of, let's call it, saved time for the future, because that's what we do, right? We work, we exchange time for money, and then we got to stock some of that for the future. The vast bulk of my saved time is in these stable environments, just the market. Now, that has worked for the last quarter of a century. Whether it's going to work for the next quarter century, the next 50 years, I don't have a crystal ball. I have no idea.
Well, I mean, I'm a little further in the journey than you, and I want to ask you another question about that in a moment. But I can say, one, you got to play the game to have any opportunity to win the game. So just by saving and investing like you were doing, and we all have regrets, right? I didn't put anything in the Netflix, so I completely missed that boat, and I was kicking myself very hard.
Well, I didn't buy any Bitcoin when it was like,
well, I did a little bit of that one though, so I did better on that, but and I did really well in Tesla. So we all have our thing, right? And when you go through the investor's journey, everyone has their stories. There's people who are very proud of NVIDIA, and others are kicking themselves. And I don't I don't love that, right? I don't think this is about shaming anyone about what they didn't do, but it is about encouraging everyone to do something. And time is the real formula here. By putting
Absolutely.
something in, you have an opportunity for it to grow, and then you give it time. When you're hitting that first million, I know that's the hardest part. But then you have enough capital, you can really start to grow faster. So now that you're thinking about that next phase, how are you thinking your strategies might shift? Because I know I talk about that as in the book too. And knowing how to manage your withdrawal rate is really key to the next phase.
Yeah, I think that's the tough part. And that's a part I'm still learning. There's the early retirement phase before the Social Security and all these benefits kicks in, and then there's the after that retirement phase. What I'm trying to do is retire early enough so that I still have the time and health to enjoy the money that I have saved, that I've invested. Right? It's really about, okay, I did all this hard work. I mean, it sounds deceptively simple, but it's very hard to do over a long period of time, right? To be able to just say, hey, I stock part of my paycheck and every paycheck, doing that consistently for 25 years. It's simple, but it's very hard. So now it's essentially time to pay myself back in the fashion that does not yet impede or damage the chances for my future self, my 60, 70, 80-year self in the future.
So I didn't do this with the other guests, but I want to stress test a little bit of your plan since you're so close, right? You're looking at transition. Well, first, do you own a home?
I do, and do still have some mortgage on it. And my plan is to actually sell it, free up the equity, because it is quite a bit of equity, and move into another area and just buy the house outright.
Okay, so you downsize, free up the cash.
You know, I have enough cash to pay off the mortgage in the home right now.
Yeah.
I personally, I don't see that as a prudent financial move because one, our HOA is actually pretty restrictive to do the kind of things I want to do. And two, it just feels like, well, now I'm going to be out of essentially my cash cushion. And should something happen, this house, even with the mortgage paid off, I still view it as a liability in that I still have property taxes, right? Sure. Any asset that I have to put in money, to me, it's not an asset, it's more of a liability.
That can be true, especially not seeing a return. That's one of the big issues with owning a home, right? Is that the value goes down so quick, and then get to a point where mortgage insurance, deductions are gone, appreciation's going to stop, but insurance and taxes, that doesn't go away. So that can be painful. Instead of selling it, have you considered just renting it out for the passive income?
I thought about that as well, but then I'm cranking the numbers, right? So let's say that this house goes for $5,000 a month. Subtract the mortgage, and then I'm at a rate where it basically comes down to maybe 1 or 2% of the equity. And just from a what can this asset do perspective, I don't think it makes sense. If you talk to some people, they have the rule called the 5% rule. So if you can rent a house every year for 5% or for under 5% of what the house is selling for, then you rent, then you don't buy. I don't strictly go by that rule, but I do see the wisdom in that.
Yeah. The only reason I bring that up is because you put a lot of work getting as much equity into the home as you have, right? And at some point, you're further along than a lot of people have opportunity-wise to be able to build that kind of income stream for yourself. Because I can tell you in retirement, if you're doing fire, you're trying to have withdrawals, inflation protected for the rest of your years, at least until you can get to your next pot, Social Security and whatnot. But having some passive income coming in, the more the better, it does bring you a lot of comfort.
Yeah. So in that regard, we got investment properties that are basically paying for itself,
Great.
Even though I do carry a mortgage on it. And one of the things that I did buy the investment property was cash, but I decided to take a mortgage out of it anyway because of what I foresee is going to be coming, i.e. the developed world has a debt problem. And if you read Ray Dalio's book about principles of navigating, Principles of Big Debt Crisis or something something like that. I have to give credit where credit is due. He's an acute student of history. And by doing his research and distilling down to a book, he essentially listed 4 ways that we can get the developed countries to get out of this debt trap once every 80-year debt cycle. And the only political palatable choice left to the government is inflation. In an inflationary situation, your assets would increase in value while your liability essentially decreases in value. So that's what I'm kind of banking on.
Got it. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so it sounds like you've thought through cash flow a bit. How are you feeling with some of the bigger expenses like that you'll lose with work, like healthcare, for instance?
That's one of the things that I'm still researching. For small problems, I say we're just going to take care of ourselves. What I want is a health insurance policy for our family that covers the big stuff. And I don't have a very good answer, to be frank. One of the things that I'm thinking is actually have an employees policy, taking out an LLC for my family. So when you have what I heard from people who do go through this route is if you go to an insurance company and essentially sell this as a combo for a family or for an LLC as a company employees, then you get discounts compared to individual policies.
I'm glad you're thinking about insurance. I mean, when you get to the point that you've gotten to, you have to think about protecting your assets. You have to also think about, let me keep asking questions. Do you have an estate plan? Is that something you put
I have a living trust.
A living trust. Got it.
We've had a living trust ever since our first child was born. And I update it once every couple of years, what assets would place in the living trust. The way I've structured is our assets are in an LLC, in a holding LLC, incorporating a state that offers charging order protection. And then the living trust owns the LLC.
Awesome. So let me wrap up just by asking you if you could go back and kind of like talk to your younger self outside of investing more in Netflix. What are kind of the big things like let me ask you differently. What do you think you're going to teach your kids? Like, how are you going to help set them up for kind of accomplishing what you did? Because being the option to retire earlier in life and leave work, that's a big deal. Not everyone gets that opportunity, but you have to work for it.
I think I would say 2 things. Set the time preference that works best for you. And by time preference, I mean this. So there are people who have what's called high time preference. They want everything they want it now, i.e. instant gratification. There are people with low time preference who are willing to delay gratification and wait for it. And this is very much of a personality-driven thing, right? I don't think I can be high time preference if I wanted to. And I know people who cannot be low time preference like I am, even if they want to. So figure out what's your time preference and pick an investment strategy that works best for you. For me, because due to my low time preference and delayed gratification nature, I chose a strategy that builds wealth over a long term. There are also people with high risk tolerance, high time preference that, they thrive in the trading game, in a market, and they can do very well as well. So it's a matter of picking a strategy that works best for your personality. And the other thing that I would tell my children is be really clear on what you need to retire, what you need to survive versus what you want, because your wants are infinite. What you need is actually pretty modest.
I think it settles as you get older as well. You start to know yourself better. Yeah, that's great. I think that's really great. I think a lot of times it comes down to people's individual risk tolerances, but also their risk capacity. Sometimes you might have, more covering you than other people have, so you can take more chances. But yeah, your time horizon is everything. And the more time you are willing to allocate, so starting earlier, the better you can potentially do for yourself and the less risky you need to be. But if you want to speed it up, you do have to take more chances, and that's for sure. But doing it in a measured way where you're mitigating the biggest risks, including your own behavior. And that's why I think teaching behaviors is really important. right? Understanding our rational versus our emotional selves, understanding different biases and being aware of them, like anchor bias, right? Like when we look at a stock, we always compare the value of that day's stock to what we bought it for. That's an arbitrary value. That's not real. But understanding that can help us let go of certain things and make better decisions. So I love that, because I think when you start to think about horizons, it frees you up quite a bit. You can just kind of be yourself and look for those problems.
But one more thing, I think tactically, this is something that everyone should do. So every 6 months, I do what's called a network accounting exercise. I add up all my assets, I add up all my liabilities, and I subtract the liabilities from assets and see what my net worth numbers at. It actually has a calming effect. I wouldn't do it any more often than once every 6 months, because if you do it every month, every quarter, then you get tied into the market sentiment. Every 6 months is more just a check of where am I. So for me, it actually offered a way, it offered a calming effect in saying, well, despite all these market gyrations, guess what? The number is still going up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I built the same thing into my planner, and the Escape the Clock template has it as well, just to be able to see the bigger picture. Because when something's going down, it can really hurt. But if you zoom out, you can see everything's fine. And you can even balance a lot of things. And if you see, okay, well, I made some investments in some commodities like gold or something, just to use an example, or maybe bonds, those are okay, even if my stock went down this day, but my portfolio is still okay. My overall portfolio might only went down 0.1%, even though I saw like a 20% drop in some stock. Once you learn to start to balance and keep things balanced, I think that can be of a calming effect as well. But this is great, Francis. I feel like you've been a student of financial literacy. You've learned a lot. You're obviously doing well. You're about to make a big transition. I feel like we should stay in touch, because the transition can be interesting. You'll learn a lot when you take that step, and you realize life really starts once you leave work. That's when it's going to really start.
I kind of got a sense of that already, because as you know, right, while I'm working, I've been engaging more in other aspects outside of work. But still, you're way ahead of me in that transition. And I think that transition will be interesting, to say the least.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your wisdom and insights and sharing it with us all. Really appreciate that, and hope to have you back sometime.
Hey, this is fun. Thank you for the opportunity.
Please introduce yourself, including your name, how old you are, where you live, and what you either currently do for a living or used to do for a living before retirement.
Hey, Daniel. Thanks for asking me to join you today. I applaud your efforts helping folks become financially independent. I've listened to your podcast. Yeah, I think it's great. My name's David Rogers. I am a musician, so therefore employment challenged. So I got a career in tech. I worked 30 years for the University of Michigan in hearing research. And when that came into the station, I decided to dedicate myself to my retirement, which I define as doing whatever I want to do. So I work with nonprofits, I got an MBA, I'm expanding my knowledge, and I'm teaching 100-level computer science courses along with artistic projects.
How old are you right now?
I am 66.
Great. And so you kind of found yourself in retirement based on kind of how you described it there. Is your retirement, or I guess semi-retirement, however you would currently define it, does it kind of meet what you thought it might be, or is it different?
Yeah, I really don't describe it as finding my retirement. I've always set long-term goals for myself from the very beginning. I was in a very difficult home environment, and I set a plan where I could eventually have an apartment and pay my own gas bill. Then I tried to escape bosses, because a study was done a fair number of years ago that said 70% of people hate their jobs and 90% of them hate them because of their bosses. So I wanted a boss-free life. So I was trying to escape people telling me what to do and me telling myself what to do for almost my entire adult life.
And do you feel like you finally got to that goal?
Yeah, I accomplished my goals pretty much every step of the way. You got to understand yourself. You got to spend time figuring out what actually is yourself and your goals and where you want to, row the canoe. You want to find that spot on the horizon. And that's kind of been my life every step of the way. And I was planning early retirement in my early 50s, and the job just kind of held me in a little longer. And that's a great place to be where, actually I had a job that I really felt like I was giving back to the community. It was a place where we were working towards restoring hearing in deaf people. And I've never hated the only boss I ever hated was my mother. And I got out from under her quickly. I love my mother, but I hate her as a boss.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like your job, though, had purpose to it, which I think is, means a lot. Yeah. I know a lot of folks I talk to are trying to escape their job. It's usually because there's a lack of purpose with work, and the toxic culture can be there too. Let me ask you, though, do you consider yourself currently financially independent?
Yes, I do. And to get back on that previous topic, I sacrificed 33% of my life income. When I was 30 and 40, working for a university in research, people were saying, oh, you can get 6 figures if you come to this gigundo company. But to me, a job that was rewarding, that I could bicycle to work, was so key. So sorry, I kind of jumped you there. Could you please repeat?
No, that's great. It sounds like you have a very strong vision of your needs when it comes to working. I think that's really important. I want to dig a little bit more into, though, do you feel like you had the luxury of choice throughout that journey? Do you ever feel completely trapped because of finances with what you were doing? And are you at a point now where you feel free from finances as something forcing you to work, even when you find it's not the right thing for you where you are in your life?
Despite the fact that I had some pretty modest jobs, and some of them were crappy and I didn't stay in them long, I was always one of those, squirrels putting away the nuts for the winter people. If I would have been hit by a bus when I was 45, I would have been very, very angry at the amount of things I sacrificed in my 30s so I could be very relaxed right now.
Gotcha. And so it sounds like that paid off, right? Because you got past your 30s. The hit by the bus factor is always on my mind as well.
I would just caution people that don't put off the heart list things. I think I waited too long to go to Vienna. I did it when I was in my 40s, but I should have done it when I was in my 20s. And you can live your life for retirement and not have the body that you need. You want to do triathlons, it's going to be tough if you retire when you're 70.
Do you have some regrets, either from, you mentioned early retirement as a possibility, but it didn't happen. Are there things you wish you would have gotten to earlier than you did, or do you find you're able to do it all now?
I find I can live a zero regrets lifestyle by always taking the high road, by always spending time, separating myself from inputs, meditating, thinking, reading. I've read Voltaire, Ben Franklin's autobiography. I've listened to these mentoring voices, and I always feel like, even if it doesn't work, I've set a good path and I tried. And if it totally crashes and burns, I say, I could have potentially been a rock star when I was in my, teens, and I think I would have died of a heroin overdose in my 20s. So with a little bit of denial, you can live a zero regrets lifestyle.
Absolutely love that. If you're sacrificing too much to get to your goal, then you're not enjoying the journey, then it's not really worth it. So you got to definitely assess what you're doing. You mind sharing a little bit about your financial strategies? Did you go big on 401k, IRAs? Was it savings account? Did you have some kind of magic that helped you get to where you were?
Well, the first thing I did is I started as young as I could. I had a lot, like everybody, I had a lot of student debt. And but luckily, the company, the university I was working for had a very generous 401k plan, so I was able to get into that in my mid-20s. And that is the big enchilada. That's like 75% of what I'm sitting on right now. The other 25% is when I got into my 30s, I pumped as much as I could into Roth IRAs, and that's about a third of my financial pie.
A lot of us are picturing ourselves where you are at your age and in your situation. We're doing a lot of the same things that you said you did. Looking back, do you wish you had done anything any differently at all?
I would love to have been able to, even when I was working a minimum wage job, which, by the way, I recently did the adjusted for inflation. Minimum wage when I was in my teens was $25 an hour. The government is failing us. So anyway, I would have loved to have gotten putting into that Roth IRA in my 20s instead of my 30s. Instead of that, pretty cool.
Okay, awesome. So most of a time horizon thing. And I know like folks who might feel like they're starting late, there's still ways to catch up on that too. We covered that. How about like, do you feel like you have enough cash flow coming in, like passive income? Are you taking Social Security, for instance, or do you have a pension?
Well, I've been waiting for full Social Security, which happens in February. So I'm right now making the decisions whether to say full Social Security in February, which would cover all of my expenses because I live frugally, or waiting till 70. And I'm looking at the risk reward of pulling from my existing 401 and Roth. I think I'm going to trigger the retirement in February. Cash flow became an issue because my spouse worked beyond when I worked, so that was a great buffer. And only in this past year do I have to, for the first time, start pulling out. And that's causing a lot of questions, and I'm hopefully making good decisions.
And how do you feel like you have any challenges anywhere, healthcare or anywhere else?
Again, university work, big university work has great benefits and low pay. So every time I go in and they talk about what I do a sleep apnea device, which by the way, if you snore, get into that because it's a lifesaver. Get that treatment. It's $1,000 out of pocket. And when I went to the facility, they said, "You've got great insurance." And I walk out with the unit. So university workers who kind of do the whole ride right now have good health care benefits for the most part. And I'll probably be the last one. And I've looked into long-term care and I've sat down with experts and I said, should I get one of these long-term disability, what if I'm in a home for 10 years? And they go, in your situation, you're better off self-insuring. I've set up a situation where I'm always going to be making more money, even without working if I get to my 70s, if I get to my 80s. And they say that they've done Monte Carlo simulations and have said you or your spouse could have 5-10 years in assisted living and pay for it out of pocket. So I am retirement rich, although I'm not going to Capri anytime soon.
I love that you're having those conversations because the contingencies are something I think people miss sometimes, thinking about, but we talk about smoothing out our income across our lifetime, right? And when we stop with work, we have to make sure that disasters are covered and risks are mitigated. It sounds like in your case, you didn't have to do too much because the type of job you had allowed you to have certain benefits where you didn't have to worry as much about at least that one type of risk. So that's awesome. Let me ask you one last kind of bigger question though. If you were to go back and talk to yourself or just talk to somebody today who's trying to feel like they're in a good spot and their 60s or 70s, what would you warn them away from, or what would you encourage them towards?
Thank you for hitting on that because that's most of what I've been thinking about leading up to this conversation. What I would say to the youth is first, know yourself. Free yourself from manipulation. If you're on social media, if you're on traditional, news sources, they are manipulating you. No one goes to Wall Street because they want to do good. And they do really vicious manipulative stuff to mom and pop investors. So spend time building your intellectual critical thinking so that you know if somebody's coming back at you. For instance, at my age, anybody who says reverse mortgage or annuity, I know, ding, 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 red alert, red alert, red alert. Lots of people don't have that critical thinking. They haven't spent that journey in their life to know when they're being manipulated. So I think manipulation is the biggest problem. People selling when there's a downturn, when you're supposed to say that's a buying opportunity. So avoid the traps that come from, you should have like a group of financial people, not necessarily, professionals, but just friends that you can run your investment ideas by. Because often when you say it out loud, halfway through it, I go, wait a minute, this is a crazy idea. And because you can get lost in your own head. So avoiding those pitfalls. So basically invest early, learn about critical manipulative people, The critical skills should be developed. And finally, use that snowball effect. There's no get-rich-fast scheme. Anybody who has a get-rich-fast scheme, they might have got lucky once, but they can't repeat it. They've never come up with all these people who are saying, I made it in the stock market, now I'm going to help you make it, to come up with your own plan. And the other thing is to don't be afraid of investments. I was in the back of a bus at the university I was working at, and I had the original iPod. And one student after another came back to me and said, is that the iPod? And I thought, wow, if I knew how to buy stocks, I think I should buy this Apple company, which was almost out of business at that time. That was a $125,000 mistake. And when I learned how to invest, I'm tapping away doing my day job, and it comes over the news that Ford is not going to take a financial bailout in the '08 financial crisis. And I went, any auto company that doesn't need federal money at this point is very well managed with a lot of cash. And I went on my computer, went, buy Ford. And I sold it about 18 months later, and I made a really great amount out of that. And one thing you learn when you start to become financially savvy is I walked into a Costco for the first time, and I went, this is an incredibly good business idea. I bought Costco. I sold it 10 years later. I did really good. Those are the three big takeaways.
That was fantastic. I really appreciate you sharing all that. I feel like there's a lot of wisdom packed in that. So thank you for going through that. Well, David, thank you so much for your time, and congratulations on your retirement, and wishing you the best.
Thank you.
I want to thank all my guests for their time and sharing their journeys today. Personally, I found each of these conversations inspiring in their own ways. Each person was in a different phase of their journey, from Brad, who was midway to his FI number, to Francis, who was preparing for the transition, to David, who's been happily retired for years. Each person shared their success, challenges, and wisdom, and I couldn't help but notice the similarities and the differences. Brad started because the traditional path of working full-time and having a family was getting him nowhere. The early win of eliminating debt spurred him on to bigger wins, but not without sacrifice. The math is the easy part, he says, but living a life of extreme frugality to achieve the number isn't worth it, because life doesn't take a back seat just because we are working towards our dreams. Francis started from humble beginnings, seeing how his parents struggled, and it instilled a value to save. Without even meaning for it, he ended up on the sure path to financial independence. Now he has the option to stop working and spend time ensuring his kids get the attention and education he wants for them. He realized that working for enough is the secret, because always chasing more is a treadmill that doesn't end. Soon he will make the transition and start his life after work, and that's where the real fun begins. David was aware of the trap early. He saw how a lack of resources could keep you pinned down and unable to live the life you want to. He had the dream job. He was working for a university doing work that really mattered, but no job lasts forever. But because of his due diligence, he was able to stay on his feet and springboard ahead when it ended. Since he worked in education, he could focus on different parts of the plan, knowing that medical would be taken care of, but his lack of income meant he needed to invest. And invest he did. Invest in IRAs and invest in the stock market. As the oldest and furthest of the group, he had some important wisdom to share with us all. Know yourself, educate yourself, and surround yourself with people that inspire and help you. Even though each person was at a different phase, they all had the same big tip. Take action now. It's never too early to start, and you can't win if you don't try. Brad, Francis, and David all agreed that it takes time to become financially free. Big windfalls aren't repeatable, but snowballs work. So if you're considering a plan for financial independence or working on one, I hope that you heard something here that resonated. These are real people who accomplish something many of us simply dream about. And it wouldn't be fair if I didn't share my story. Many of you know it from my book or other podcasts that I've been on, but here's the short version for those that are unaware. I grew up watching my family struggle with money. It was a big part of our lives, and it really stayed with us and defined us throughout my childhood and even into my adulthood. But being a quiet, introverted kid, I took control in the only place that I really could, which was school. I did well, and I got into a good college. I had to borrow everything I could, though, and I was even working part-time while I was attending classes, and I still ended up with over $100,000 in debt. It was very difficult, and I ended up choosing to do a bachelor in computer science simply because the income would be higher. And I ended up getting into that career, but I never stayed at a job long, usually at most 2 years. I would end up making move after move just to keep increasing my salary because the debt was stifling. I ended up getting married right out of college, and I supported my spouse's education in graduate school. We started a family, and it was really easy to see pretty quickly that we were never going to get ahead. So I started educating myself. I made sure to take employee matches in 401k. I learned how credit scores worked, and I made a debt reduction plan. I invested in a home, and I made improvements to it to increase its value. Eventually, I made a big move, and I applied to work for Microsoft. I got the job, and we had to move from Ohio to Redmond, Washington, and our cost of living tripled, but my income doubled. And the housing market at that time collapsed, though. This was around 2008, 2009, and we ended up having 3 mortgages. Eventually, we ended up short selling our home in Ohio, but we made a smart decision. We decided to invest in a rural part of Washington, in an area that was developing. So the home that we ended up buying was cheaper, at least for Washington standards. And now 20 years later, the home that we decided on has doubled in value. It was a really smart decision. And it was a huge milestone in our financial plan. Debt got eliminated. Kids' 529 goals were being hit. House paid off. Passive income was starting to meet our essential cost of living. Medical, insurance, estate plans, all in place. All the milestones that were needed in the program were being hit. And so eventually, I left work. And this was just as the industry I was working in was going through a terrible transformation, thanks to artificial intelligence and new work policies and leadership styles, the season of layoffs, and it's been very difficult. But my FI plan saved my health and maybe even my relationships with family, with friends. I was able to beat my goal by 3 years. I had a 20-year plan and I was able to beat it and do it faster, retiring with a net worth that would cover my cost of living until I was 100 years old, all inflation adjusted. And so I was asked to write a book, and I did, and I poured myself into it. It's become a comprehensive guide for anyone in any phase. And the book took multiple awards, and so I dedicated myself to helping others. This has become my early retirement purpose, even though anyone who knows me knows retirement isn't really a word I would use for this. But anyways, I started volunteer teaching finance in my state, doing free one-on-one consultations, first mostly with friends, and then old coworkers, and now with anyone. And I'm part of the way done getting a degree as a wealth management planner, or WMCP. Not because I wanted to go back to work, just because I know that doing this, I can even learn more and help others better. My family, we foster dogs that need home. I compete in billiards leagues. I travel when I want to. I go on dates with my wife whenever she's free and up for it. I'm just living my best life. All because money is no longer a factor and I have my time back. I hope you can do that as well if that's your goal. And I'm here to help. You just heard from 4 people, myself included, that proves that it is possible. You can do it. I also want to hear from you. What's the one thing that's holding you back when it comes from escaping the clock? Send me an email at escapetheclockmedia@gmail.com or leave a comment on the show's page. We might just feature your answer in an upcoming episode. Thanks for listening, and best of luck escaping the clock. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. Remember, while I'm not yet a financial planner, I am getting my degree in wealth management. You should take anything you've heard here as tips and advice to making your plan. To learn more, visit www.escapetheclock.com. There, you can find the book, resources, including the planner, and you can even schedule time with me. Please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.